South Dakota, 1984. A research team excavating a hillside found something that didn't belong. A marine reptile skeleton, a plesiosaur, roughly 7 meters long, a genus that had no business being in what is now the American Midwest, but the sea had been there once. The skeleton was real. What caught their attention wasn't the skeleton. It was what had been done to it. The bones had been eaten, not by a predator, by something patient, something that had returned to the carcass, repeatedly, over what must have been weeks. The bite marks were oval, arranged in parallel rows, pressing through the bone and leaving clean channels where teeth had raked across cortical surface. They didn't match any predator in the local record. They matched a shark. What follows is what happens when you stop asking what prehistoric sharks looked like and start asking what they actually did. Fossil evidence of predation is rare, not because predators were rare, they were everywhere, but because violent deaths leave traces that require the right conditions to survive 70, 80, 100 million years. When those conditions are right, what survives is unambiguous. A shark's teeth are individually distinctive. Different species leave different bite geometries, different channel widths, different angles of entry, different spacing between the marks. A Squalicorax tooth channel looks nothing like a Cretoxyrhina tooth channel. Both look nothing like a mosasaur bite. Forensic paleontologists have built a reference library from thousands of specimens, and when they see a mark, they can tell you not just that something was bitten, but what bit it, how hard, whether it was alive or dead at the time, and how many times the predator returned. The evidence from the Mesozoic is extraordinary in its specificity and in its brutality. Squalicorax was not the largest shark of the Cretaceous. It reached perhaps 3 to 4 meters. Formidable, but not a giant. What made it remarkable was its behavior. Squalicorax was a scavenger, an aggressive, persistent, opportunistic scavenger that fed on animals it almost certainly could not have killed. And the fossil record shows it knew exactly how to find them. Its bite marks have been found on hadrosaur limb bones in Kansas, on mosasaur vertebrae, on a giant sea turtle carapace in Morocco, on a pterosaur bone from Texas, which means the carcass had either floated to sea or the shark had worked its way up a river into brackish water to reach it. The crow shark got its name from behavioral analogy with crows, intelligent, flexible, drawn to anything dead or dying. The hadrosaur case is the most disturbing. The animal was a large herbivorous dinosaur, Plesiosaurus, roughly 7 meters. The limb bones show repeated bite channels from a Squalicorax-sized shark at different depths and angles, consistent with the shark returning to the carcass over multiple days. The bone had been chamfered. The shark had bitten through to the marrow. The channels on the cortical surface are so consistent, so methodical, that paleontologists describe the feeding as systematic. It ate this animal one section at a time, over days, until the bones were hollowed. Cretoxyrhina mantelli is the most dangerous shark in the fossil record by a significant margin. It was roughly 6 to 7 meters long, comparable to a great white, with teeth that were not serrated. This is significant. Most large sharks use serration to tear through flesh. Cretoxyrhina's teeth were smooth-edged, blade-like, and strong enough to cut through bone in a single pass. Its nickname in academic literature is the Ginsu shark, after the kitchen knife marketed for cutting through metal. The comparison is not flattery. In 1890, Charles Sternberg excavated a mosasaur skeleton in Kansas, Tylosaurus, one of the largest marine reptiles of the Cretaceous, reaching 12 meters. Inside the ribcage, he found 17 Cretoxyrhina teeth, not near the skeleton, inside it. The shark had attacked the mosasaur, lost or shed teeth inside the body cavity during feeding, and the mosasaur had then either sunk or been buried before the shark could retrieve everything it wanted. More remarkable, a separate Tylosaurus specimen examined in 2005 showed healed bite marks on the vertebrae. The mosasaur had been attacked by Cretoxyrhina and survived. The bone had grown back around the channels. The animal had lived for years after the attack, carrying the record of it in its skeleton. This is not a story about death. It is a story about what survived the attack and what the attack left behind. The plesiosaur specimen from South Dakota, the one that opened this, is formally catalogued as SDSM2465. It was identified in the literature as an elasmosaurid, a long-necked plesiosaur of the type with up to 72 vertebrae in the neck alone. The bite marks on the ribs are attributed to a Squalicorax-sized shark, but the analysis found something more specific. The marks appear on both anterior and posterior sections of the rib cage at consistent angles, suggesting the shark approached the carcass from multiple directions. It was feeding on the soft tissue of the body cavity, the organs, the viscera, which have long since dissolved. What remain are the rib bones with the channels scored by teeth that were seeking something deeper. The elasmosaur died in what is now a landlocked state. The sea it swam in has been gone for 66 million years. But the mark of what fed on it afterwards is still readable. The shark's feeding pattern is written into the bone, preserved at the molecular level, waiting 82 million years for someone with the right instruments to read it. The evidence is not ambiguous. Not all fossil shark attacks are readable in the bones of victims. Some of the most disturbing evidence comes from the sharks themselves. Helicoprion is one of the strangest animals in the fossil record, a shark-like fish from the Permian and early Triassic, 290 to 250 million years ago, that possessed a tooth whorl in its lower jaw, a spiral of teeth coiling inward like a nautilus shell with the oldest teeth at the center and each new tooth generation growing outward. The whorl could reach 45 centimeters across. For most of the 20th century, nobody knew where in the jaw it sat. Reconstructions placed it at the snout, on the dorsal fin, in the tail. In 2013, CT scanning of the skull finally confirmed it. The whorl sat entirely in the lower jaw, coiling back into the throat. The mechanism: prey was drawn in by the upper jaw. The whorl rotated, not by muscle but by the closing motion of the jaw itself, and the spiral of teeth spiraled through the prey as it was drawn backward, like a saw blade, but one integrated into the anatomy of the lower jaw. The preferred prey: cephalopods, soft-bodied, fast, abundant. The spiral tooth whorl was perfectly adapted to grip them, puncture the shell, and draw them through. Specimens have been found with cephalopod remains in the gut region. The attack left nothing behind, no bones to score. The prey was soft, the digestion complete. The only record is the predator, its extraordinary anatomy, its spiral, its 300 million years of hunting before the Triassic-Jurassic extinction eventually ended its lineage. The fossil record of shark predation spans 450 million years. Sharks were present before the first land animals. They were present before the first trees. They hunted through 5 mass extinction events and emerged from each one with their fundamental anatomy almost unchanged. What changed was their prey. When marine reptiles dominated Mesozoic seas, sharks fed on them, opportunistically, systematically, returning to carcasses over days. When the reptiles died at the end of the Cretaceous, sharks adapted to the mammals that replaced them. The attack patterns changed. The prey changed. The teeth evolved incrementally. But the behavior, the return to the carcass, the methodical stripping of bone, the willingness to take anything the ocean offered, that behavior is documented across 450 million years of fossil evidence. The great white shark has been here for 4 million years. By shark standards, it is a recent invention. The lineage that produced it goes back to animals that were feeding on creatures that had no name for the sea they died in. Here is what this means for you. The ocean you have swum in, or flown over, or watched from a beach, the unease you feel when the water gets dark under you, is not irrational. It was written into the nervous system of the first primates that entered coastal environments. Their bodies knew, at some level, that the sea had its own rules, that something in it had been operating, at full efficiency, for longer than land animals had existed. The great white is the version of that something that is still here. The Cretoxyrhina, the Squalicorax, the Helicoprion, they are gone, but the bite marks they left are still in the rock, and the lineage that produced them produced the animal that is still, right now, swimming in water you have touched. The fossil record doesn't just tell us what happened, it tells us what was always going to happen. If Helicoprion represents a tooth structure that defies expectation, Edestus represents something that defies explanation entirely. Edestus was a carboniferous shark, roughly 300 million years ago, with a jaw structure that still has no consensus functional interpretation. Unlike Helicoprion's lower jaw whorl, Edestus had a cutting structure in both the upper and lower jaw, curved rows of teeth growing outward from the symphysis at the front of each jaw, extending in a curving blade that projected forward from the mouth. The overall effect, in reconstruction, resembles an open pair of scissors. The teeth did not replace individually, as in modern sharks. They grew as a unit, in a single piece, projecting further forward as the animal aged. The problem No one has yet proposed a prey capture mechanism that fully accounts for this anatomy. The scissors jaw geometry would be effective at slashing through soft-bodied prey with a lateral head movement, a scissoring action, but ineffective for grasping, for pursuing, or for the bite-and-hold strategy used by most large predators. The current hypothesis is that Edestus was an ambush predator in dense underwater vegetation, using the projecting jaw structure to slice through schools of fish or soft-bodied cephalopods with a single sideways pass, the lateral slash, as an attack strategy. From a shark, Edestus grew to approximately 4 meters. It was operating in the same carboniferous seas as the giant sea scorpions, the large orthocones, and the early land animals that were tentatively exploring the coastline. Everything in the water was, by modern standards, wrong, and the sharks were leading the way. Here is the line that connects the Carboniferous Ocean to the water you swam in last summer. The cartilaginous fish lineage, sharks, rays, chimeras, has maintained a continuous presence in the ocean for 450 million years. In that time, the ocean's chemical composition has changed. The oxygen levels have risen and fallen. The temperature has swung from greenhouse to icehouse and back. 5 mass extinction events have eliminated the majority of animal species on Earth. The lineage survived all of them, not unchanged. The individual species come and go, and the Helicoprion and Edestus lineages are gone. Their specific anatomical experiments no longer in the water, but the fundamental plan, cartilaginous skeleton, electrosensory organs, continuous tooth replacement, streamlined body, has remained because it works. It worked in the Devonian. It worked in the Carboniferous. It worked through the Permian extinction, when 96% of marine species disappeared. It worked through the Cretaceous Paleogene event that ended the non-avian dinosaurs. The fossil record of shark attacks is 450 million years of documentation of this fact. Whatever the ocean has been, sharks have been in it, and they have been feeding. The bite marks in 82-million-year-old bone in Kansas are not ancient. They are a recent entry in a record that starts before complex animals existed. The shark is not an old animal. The shark is the animal that survived everything that ended every other old animal.